measures by the government. And our question today, do you believe that the government is genuine in its latest efforts to reduce budget spending?
Most definitely. And actually, speaking of the whole austerity and what really Kenyans are going through this particular morning, we will be talking about matters mental health, the whole prevention of it, and also promoting mental health. Just having a mental free space, how really important is it? We'll be discussing that this morning.
Well, and on the other side, I'll be speaking to Sylvia, who is an artist as well as a police officer, and see how what art really means to her and how it helps her also to juggle between her work. It's all, the conversation is the brush and the badge. But I think now to,
balancing both of them.
Now to me, it's balancing the pen and the brush today. I'll be looking forward to see if I have some artistic skills. You definitely do have to stand by for that.
To miss that. Okay, let's take a look at the highlights now.
Right, and President Ruto now directs all government ministries to slash 10% of their expenditure for this financial year as part of the austerity measures to adjust to global economic crisis.
Brace for dry taps. Most parts of the city of Nairobi to go without water for more than 24 hours starting Thursday morning due to a complete shutdown of the Ngethu water treatment plant for maintenance.
About as a plague of bedbug hits Paris and other French cities, provoking a wave of insectophobia and raising questions about health and safety during next year's Olympic Games.
Yes, so wale wanataka kupiga picha wakiwa Paris ati Palace juu wapi. When they come back, don't welcome them to your home. There's a bedbug infestation in Paris and other cities of France. Interesting. Have you ever imagined that?
Oh no.
It's a serious. All the movie theaters, the trains, even Parliament.
Even Parliament, they were discussing that yesterday, talking about all that. Have you experienced?
Well, I haven't.
Well, if you've been in the campus hostels, you must have gone through that at some point.
Depends on which campus you went to. Anyway,
I was visiting a friend in KU.
Come on.
My campus was on a different level.
Oh,
we apologize. I'm used to Stanley Nyerungita, bedbugs. I have, back in primary school level, back in Makueni, it was tough. It was tough.
The type of schools.
Well, listen, at least you have one common thing with people who traveled to Paris in the last few days.
Oh yes, and I also speak French, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's now take a look at the top story. President William Ruto has directed all government agencies to slash their expenditure by 10% in the current financial year in order to align their expenditure with available resources. The directive, communicated through a cabinet dispatch, is part of austerity measures to ensure the state agencies adjust to global economic crisis. The president told a cabinet meeting yesterday that there is need for the government to exercise prudence in resource utilization, firmly stating that wastage and corruption would not be tolerated. The move is aimed at bringing back sanity in government spending that has been described as wasteful. This latest directive came only a day after the head of public service suspended all non-essential foreign travel for government officials. And a reminder of our question this morning, we ask, do you think the government is genuine in its latest efforts to cut spending? You can share your feedback with us on our social media pages, TV47 News on X, TV47 Kenya on Facebook. Let's now take a look at the day's diary.
Well, and on the diary this morning, we start off with that story concerning the mysterious disease in Kakamega County. And as of now, Another mystery of disease has hit at least 62 Iregi Girls High School students and are being hospitalized in various hospitals in Kakamega County of an undisclosed illness. The disease cause is under investigation to find out the cause. That will be that to be communicated. The cause of the day and matters concerning Haiti mission. President William Ruto now has expressed his confidence in the police officers that are to be deployed to Haiti, and the 15-member UN Security Council voted to authorize a mission that would guard critical infrastructure such as airports, schools, hospitals, and key traffic intersections in the Caribbean nation. And today we expect the Cabinet Secretary for Public Service, Affirmative Action and Agenda, Aisha Jumo, to appear before the Senate to answer on accountability questions concerning her docket. And remember, on Wednesday, every other Wednesday, the National Assembly and the Senate always has that question time with CSs. And away from that, the EACC boss, that is the CEO, Twali Mbarak, now has declined the proposal by the governors to get impeachment immunity, saying there is no grace period for impunity. Remember, on Monday, the re-elected COG chairperson, Anwe Guru, had proposed to have that revised. However, that may not happen following what the EACC boss said yesterday while appearing before the National Dialogue Committee. And today in history, in 1992, the 15-year-long civil war fought between the Mozambique resistance movement, the Mozambican government, the conflict which began in 1997, just a couple of years after the War of Independence against the Portuguese, resulted in massive losses of human life and property. The civil war ended with the signing of the Rome General Peace Accords by both of the warring parties. And of course, away from that, the conversation on the bipartisan talks continues today at the Bomas of Kenya. That is what we have on the diary this morning. Time now to look at what's on the dailies.
Yes, we go to the front pages of the dailies this morning, and we start off with the Standard newspaper. And on the Standard, Ruto-Raila clash of ideas at dialogue meeting. Different strokes. Azimio and Kenya Kwanza yesterday differed on Kenya's future and how to resolve electoral injustices when they submitted their views to the National Dialogue Committee. Government side wants nothing to do with an audit of last year's election, whereas the opposition still insists it won and a review is needed. The story is on page 6 of the Standard this morning, and the images there of the president and the Azimio leader Raila Odinga. The other story featured prominently on the front page of the Standard this morning, peace mission or West setup? A question there. Case of Haiti. The UN has given a nod to the mission to be led by Kenyans, but critics wonder how it will be done where many have failed. However, the president says no retreat, no surrender. The story is on page 4. Another story, Nyamira boss survives MCA's ouster. Nyamira governor's problems eased after MCAs could not marshal enough votes to get him impeached. Only 16 voted to remove Amos Nyaribo, while 18 defended him. The story is on page 16 of the Standard today. On the top strip of the Standard, turning point for Catholic Church. A crucial meeting in Vatican is supposed to give direction on a myriad of issues facing the church. The story is on page 2. An interesting headline, Catholic Church could bless same-sex couples, but, says Pope Francis, something that could come out of the Vatican meeting. On the enterprise pullout inside the Standard, we talk about inside the mind of a venture capitalist. That's another highlight on the front page. And finally, Newcastle's big moment in Europe. The story is on page 32. That's the back page of the Standard today. Newcastle come out and play. And this is the first Champions League game at St. James's Park in more than 20 years. Newcastle tonight host Paris Saint-Germain. Other UEFA Champions League games, Atletico de Madrid versus Feyenoord, Dortmund versus Milan, Leipzig versus Man City, and Porto versus Barcelona. I think we're in agreement that today we do not need to revisit any games that were played last night.
Yeah.
Isn't that so, Stanley?
I serve a living God.
We do agree.
I serve a living
Let's move on.
You know, one thing, as Manu, we're used to, lakini kama for Arsenal, it's new for you guys. So
the whole
thrashing.
We're in agreement.
Anyway.
Right, let's have a look at the Daily Nation this morning, and the top headline there, Ruto reverses Uhuru's 6 billion shillings telecom buyout. The Kenya Kwanza government yesterday overturned a decision by the Uhuru Kenyatta administration to purchase a 60% stake in Telecom Kenya just days to the 2022 general election, and directed UK private investment fund Helios and its Kenyan affiliate Jamhuri Holdings to refund the money paid for the acquisition. That story is covered on page 7 of the Daily Nation this morning. And on the top strip of the Daily Nation, panic as 95 Iregi girl students are taken ill. The mysterious disease breaks out at school. That story there is covered on page 10 of the Daily Nation. And on the right strip, the Daily Nation this morning, how Nyaribo survived Auster. Nyamira governor pictured there. Amos Nyaribo yesterday survived an impeachment motion after he failed to garner support from at least 2/3 of the members of the county assembly. And Mr. Nyaribo's move to whip members in his United Progressive Party to vote against the impeachment motion appeared to have worked in his favor. That story there covered on page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. And there's also another story there featured on page 3 of the Daily Nation. Michelle Ntalami sues Mnet, a TV series, for damaging her reputation. Social media influencer says that producers of the show included her in 3 episodes without her consent. An interesting piece there to look at. And on the back page of the Daily Nation, cricket's YouTube girl Quinta dreams big. That's stories on page 37. I have on the back page of the Daily Nation this morning. We are watching. EACC warns governors on El Nino money, and anti-graft agency has warned county government officials against misappropriating the funds. And at a glance there, counties have cried out for the additional cash. The COG called on the national government to ensure that at least 50% of the National Contingency Fund is set aside for the regional authorities. The COG chair, Anwe Guru, said counties said counties only have about 1 billion shillings and much more cash needs to be mobilized. She also added the National Treasury to release the outstanding balances of county allocations for August and September this year, totaling to 35.24 billion shillings to enable them to work adequately. And also featured on the back page of the Daily Nation is TSC to phase out manual processing of retirement benefits for first payment. And the numbers, 2,000 is the number of teachers who leave the service due to retirement every year. And TSC has embarked on an automation of payment of retirement benefits for the retired teachers. And that is pretty much what is featuring on the Daily Nation this morning.
Tukisonga mbele, habari kuu katika gazeti la Taifa Leo ni kuwa magavana mfano bora. Taifa Leo kiangazia masuala ya ugatuzi asubuhi hii ya leo. Taifa Leo sema kuwa huku magavana wengine wakikwaruzana na manaibu wao, hawa ni kuchapa kazi tu. Wakizungumzia masuala ya siasa, huku uhasama ukishamiri kati ya baadhi ya magavana na manaibu wao. Kuna wale ambao wameonyesha mfano bora kwa kufanya kazi kwa utulivu na manaibu wao. Kisa na maana, manaibu hao wana idara mahususi za kusimamia. Katika ukurasa wa pili wamechapisha picha za manaibu magavana na manaibu wao kaunti ya Nairobi, Kisumu, Nandi, Kilifi, Mombasa na pia Kwale. Vidokezo vingine katika gazeti la Taifa Leo, bloga ndani kuhusisha DP na mauaji. Bwana Sylvans Abeta kizimbani kuchapisha habari za kumharibia sifa naibu rais. Mengi ni katika ukurasa wa 3 na Taifa. Habari hiyo katika kaunti ya Kakamega, wanafunzi 90 wa Eregi hospitalini. Shule nyingine ya wasichana Kakamega yaathiriwa na ugonjwa wa kutatanisha. Papa pabaya kuunga ndoa ya jinsia moja. Papa Francis asema baadhi ya watu katika ndoa za jinsia moja waweza kubarikiwa. Tukisonga mbele, hapo juu, ziara ya Ruto ngome ya Raila yatia magavana Azimio kiwewe. Magavana hawajui namna ya kumlaki rais bila kukwaza kinara wa upinzani wakati wa ziara hiyo ya siku 4 inayoanza siku ya Ijumaa. Mengine katika ukurasa wa 3. Kwenye michezo, FC Porto wenyeji wa Baka leo. Barcelona FC waongoza kundi kwa wingi wa mabao katika ukurasa wa 20. Hata hivyo, habari kuu katika gazeti la Taifa leo ni magavana mfano bora. Fred.
Something positive there from county news. Well, let's take a look at the Star this morning. And on the Star, secret agents to spy on state officials' accounts. That's a big headline on the front page of the Star this morning. Tough new rules meant to curb money laundering and terrorism financing. The story is on pages 4 and 5 of the Star. Another story given prominence there: 40 families left homeless after heavy winds destroy houses. And we have images there on the front page of the Star about what's happening there. Elsewhere, Ruto-Raila teams clash over audit of 2022 election. And another highlight, Kenya to get newly approved malaria vaccine in 2024. One more highlight on the front page of the Star, and it's on the top strip. It talks about the expected elections for the UDA party. 586,000 posts up for grabs as Ruto party gears up for grassroots polls rather. The story is on page 7, and those are the stories given prominence on the Star this morning.
Well, let's have a look at the Business Daily, and the top headline there is Kenya's default on 596 billion shillings as interest rates hit a ceiling. Bad loans have hit 16-year high of 15% in August, and the CBK data shows default rate worst since 2007. And on the Business Daily there's that graph showing the deteriorating rates of defaulting. And away from that, elevated fuel and electricity prices spook Kenyan CEOs. The elevated fuel and electricity prices have cut the purchasing power of consumers, hurting a demand for goods and services. The central bank survey capturing concerns of Kenya's chief executive as shown. And of course, there was that motion that was proposed yesterday by a member of parliament in the National Assembly to discuss on matters increase in fuel prices. So we do hope that there will be that discussion, that debate within the course of this week. But away from that, on the right strip of the Business Daily, Ruto debt please increase Kenya's distress fears. Global investors have demanded for the first time since May more than 18% return to invest in Kenya's Eurobond, which matures in 9 months. That story there is on page 4 of the Business Daily. And Vivo Energy to cement dominance with Lexo deal. Vivo Energy, the retailer of Shell branded products, has secured a retail agreement with Dutch-owned Lexo Energy that promises to strengthen its dominance of Kenya's oil market. Netflix ends a free plan for Kenyan subscriber from November. Streaming service provider Netflix is discontinuing its free plan in Kenya starting next month in what promises to cut off thousands of subscribers who have enjoyed complimentary access since 2021. Oh no.
Wow, interesting. Your face betrays you. Let's take a look at the People Daily, and on the front page of the People Daily, the Kenya we want, that's a big headline. National dialogue, key political protagonists and civil society propose constitutional and administrative reforms that could radically alter the country's governance structures. The main story on pages 4 and 5 of the People Daily. Quotes there by the Azimio la Umoja spokesperson Ndirito Mureithi: "We are in debt distress. Debt default is looming and the country is on a wrong trajectory." And on Kenya Kwanza's side, the SG of the UDA party, Cleophas Malala, says Parliament should enact legislation for establishment of the office of Leader of Opposition. And this was following their appearance separately before the National Dialogue Committee conducting talks at the Bomas of Kenya. The other story given a prominence on the front page is on the top strip: Ruto's big gamble on Haiti. Story is on page 2. And another highlight there, or at the very top: country's long wait for El Nino triggers anxiety. Story on pages 6 and 7. And it's interesting that Kenyans are actually eagerly awaiting for the El Nino rains. Yeah. You wonder what the excitement is about. Anyway, acha itakuja tu.
Yes, we can vuka border now and go to Kampala and see what is trending. Yesterday there were quite interesting highlights on in Uganda, and the whole bit of malaria also reflecting in Uganda as well. So the big story and the big highlight on the Daily Monitor this morning on the front page is how new malaria vaccine will work. And a brief there, so they call it a milestone. The health minister said the country is considering the new malaria vaccine, which the World Health Organization has recommended in the planned immunization against the disease. Uganda now plans to roll out the program targeting children aged under 5. More on that is on page 5. And just below there, Ntare School suspends all S6 students. That is on matters in discipline. And actually, speaking of suspending, there was a similar highlight beginning of this week, somewhere in the Western girls' high school that had suspended some girls on allegations of lesbianism and other indiscipline. Well, that is on Kenya. Now in Uganda, other stories making it to the Daily Monitor. On the bottom strip there, Parliament demands report on Alupo Nabanja US trip. So the Ugandan Parliament has directed the Minister for Foreign Affairs, General Jeje Ondangjeje, to explain how 71 members, okay, can't really see that. Basically, that particular 71 member contingent traveled to the United Nations General Assembly in New York last month. 71. Speaking of matters, austerity in Kenya, Uganda is a little shaky. Other highlights making it there is King Mumbere returns to Kasese today after 7 years. And a coffin sale at Mulago Hospital Gate sparks debate on ethics. On the right side of Daily Monitor, UWA in new US donation graft scandal. And on the top strip there, Matters Homes choosing tiles for commercial properties. Okay, yeah, that is all on the Daily Monitor in Uganda.
Well, in Tanzania, the citizen this morning, some good news there for them. How TRA exceeded 2 trillion shillings a monthly collection goal, and revenue collection rose to record levels in the first quarter of 2023-2024, thanks to a range of factors including expansion of economic activities, adoption of technology and public awareness campaigns. That story is on page 2 of the Citizen this morning. And away from that, WHO recommend second malaria vaccine for children. Also headlining on the Citizen this morning, government now eyes Eurozone for SGR financing. That is what's making headlines in Tanzania on the Citizen.
Okay, tuangazie gazeti la Mwananchi kule Tanzania. Habari kuu pale kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi: matumaini mapya utekelezaji bajeti. Mwenendo wa makusanyo ya mapato TRA waonyesha ukuaji, kwamba serikali inaendelea kupata msuli kifedha wa kumudu bajeti yake. Shilingi trilioni 3 kwingine shilingi trilioni 9. Kumbuka hizi ni fedha za Tanzania, usistuke. Bado kwenye ukurasa wa mbele vidokezo vingine, ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi kule Dar, kero ya maji, umeme, afya kilio kikubwa. Kwingineko, mume azika mke chini ya ulinzi kisa kutochangia gharama za matibabu. Habari zingine kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi, simulizi milima mabonde kuhusu Daktari Salim A. Salim. Pale juu kwenye gazeti la Mwananchi, DK Mpango wa kerwa tabia za ATCL kuchelewesha kuahirisha safari, issues to do with the airline there. Na hizi ndizo habari zilizopewa kipaumbele kule Tanzania kwenye gazeti la Mwananchi. Turejee nyumbani tuangazie masuala ya karakacha.
And on page 17 of Daily Nation and also on page 12 of the Standard, we do start with page 17 of the Daily Nation. One matter that really is close to home, a satirical piece there. Weighing scale has family, friends, that is family, friend, or girlfriends delegation. And that weighing scale is titled the foreign travel. So just immediately an imaginary airport, imaginary plane there, just when you alight, probably when you're departing, you have to stand on that weighing scale and see, where do you weigh? Is it delegation, your family, friends, or girlfriend? And the three gentlemen there, the top three bosses who look like President Ruto, Deputy President Rigathi, and Prime Minister Musalia Mudavadi.
Well, well, it speaks, I think it reflects that directive by the head of public service on suspending unnecessary or non-essential public travel for senior government officials. Also, the fact that now even the number of people accompanying the president, the deputy president, the first lady, or the prime cabinet CS should be reduced by about 50% from what it has been. Hence that weighing scale that they're going to measure by half what you've been traveling with. And well, just part of the austerity measures as well.
Yeah, and probably if that was practical, once you stand there and, for example, that scale, that red scale there marks at girlfriend, you're told ka kidogo, ka kando kidogo. Then we're moving with only the members that are supposed to join the president or the CSs on the foreign trips.
It also refers to our question today.
Yeah.
Do you believe the government is genuine in its latest efforts to cut spending? Do you think the government is genuine in its latest efforts to cut spending? Remember, the cabinet yesterday directed government ministries and departments to slash their expenditure by 10%. And whether or not this will happen, we just have to wait and see.
Then again, it depends on who is standing next to you when you're weighing that scale. If he's going to say, nitoleki tu kidogo, or if he's going to be strict about it. And actually, speaking of matters being strict, in the United States of America, former US President Donald Trump, that is on page 12 of the Standard, and they have a caricature of Donald Trump, and that table there says Trump 2024. Trump was in court. He appeared in court on Monday.
Yes.
Told to appear there on matters fraud, really reflecting on his family and also his organization. And according to that one is there on how he's been spending for the past years that he's been in office, how he has been spending monies.
Okay. And I think the most interesting bit about this cartoon is the flag that is behind that image of Donald Trump. This is a U.S. Confederate flag, and it's representative of some of the states. It's not the U.S. flag. Yeah, so he's dependent on some particular states, especially those from the South, for his re-election, if at all he'll get there come 2024.
And really goes to speak on how a change of tact on how he might even try to get back to office. The whole, his first ever mugshot of even a head of state.
It's interesting, yeah. It's interesting how sympathy votes always works for some politicians when it comes mostly to presidential elections. It also speaks to what we saw in some years back here in Kenya.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And probably this might work for the better for Trump, but let's wait and see for the 2024 presidential elections in the US.
All right, so that is what is headlining today in the dailies.
We do have
Business Daily.
Business Daily.
Oh, the cartoon on Business Daily, okay.
Oh, yes.
But the cartoons on Business Daily are just...
You just look at them and laugh.
Yes. And there's a woman here, pictured, and a man, and he's looking at something. And the quote here is, "Now that you know my personality type, I have no excuse to behave exactly the same." I don't know if you have it. Yeah, but that is just it.
Now that you know my personality, I don't have to change.
I don't have to pretend.
Ah.
Yeah. So to song it.
Well, largely speaks on Nairobi girls.
Oh.
Okay.
Don't shoot me. I'm just a messenger.
No, I'm a Meru girl.
It's once again a reminder of a question we're asking this morning. Do you think the government is genuine in its latest efforts to cut spending? Continue sharing your feedback with us on TV47 News, at TV47 News on X, TV47 Kenya on Facebook. After the break, we'll be having this discussion about government austerity measures, and in studio we'll be having Alex Mwathi, political analyst, Kabando wa Kabando, former MP Mukurweini, and hoping Dr. Ekuru Aukot will make it as a party leader, Third Way Alliance. Do stand by for that conversation. You're watching Morning Cafe. Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Indimuli. We now want to go into this discussion about government austerity measures, but before we do that, we'll still have to take a look at the headlines today. And with me in studio is engineer Alex Mwathi, political analyst. Karibu sana. Bwana Mwathi, it's always a pleasure to have you in studio.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yes.
And thank you so much for an opportunity even to speak to this nation about
Asante.
Issues of the day. Really appreciate and thank you.
Asante sana.
And good morning, viewers. Let's hope that we have a good debate today.
So quite a number of things have happened since the last time you were here, and a quick look at the headlines. Let's start off with what's headlining on the Daily Nation. Ruto reverses Uhuru's 6 billion shilling telecom buyout. And this happened, I think this was communicated through the cabinet dispatch yesterday after the cabinet meeting. Kenya Kwanza government yesterday overturned a decision by the Uhuru Kenyatta administration to purchase a 60% stake in Telkom Kenya just days to the 2022 general election, and directed UK private investment fund Helios and its Kenyan affiliate Jamhuri Holdings to refund the money paid for the acquisition. This whole debate about the transition from one administration to another, and it takes so much time to probably reverse or correct things that you felt the other administration didn't do correct, or is it just a case of the new administration trying to distinguish itself and taking a different path from the previous one?
There's an angle of the new administration trying to create a niche for themselves and to show that they are thinking indifferent. But unfortunately for Kenya Kwanza, it's been very sad because a lot of things that they had been talking about in a negative sense in the previous regime, they have themselves reversed. What comes to mind immediately is that there was so much hullabaloo and a lot of just thumping about the 30 acres that Kenyatta University was supposed to cede to World Health Organization. And I remember the people that are now in government were very much vehement and supporting the Vice Chancellor in his refusal to release that land. Last week they released it back. Last week they gave, they allocated quite a substantial amount of money in that project that was coming up. And the other things that has happened, criticized before, but now has been reversed. And this might be one of them. Remember, we are idiotic in thinking that they are different because they were part of the government anyway. The president now was a deputy president. He never resigned because he felt that the other government was doing things wrong. So he was really part of what that government decision was taking. So even in this buyout and all that, we give it time. I'm looking at a situation where it's a business deal, that there are contracts that are signed before the money was transferred to Helios. It's not somebody waking up in the morning and just signing a piece of paper and giving it out. So it's a whole reversal of process, to an extent that if Helios would stand their grounds, they will not refund, they'll go to court.
Yeah, because
they'll go to court and demand the money.
Yes.
But this is an unfortunate thing. If you remember, when Kibaki came to power, and that's why he was able to have a quick effect in terms of governance, he never went back to what Moi did. Kibaki chatted his mouth.
What kind of risk are we looking at? Because government exists in perpetuity, that decisions made by one administration, the next administration has no choice but to continue with.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Except where they can be able to use the legal means to be able to go around it. But decisions that are made by this government must be followed through in the next government. If you remember, Parliament starts some projects in a constituency, you don't expect the next MP to come and cancel all the contracts that the person was doing.
But that appears
you must have looked
that
for
is a
ways.
Trend. Even at the county level, most governors coming in have this tendency to forget about projects that had been kick-started by their predecessors.
That's why we're in the same position 60 years after independence. We're not moving forward.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting, and Kabando, the former MP from Mukurweini, is joining the panel shortly, and we'll be introducing him. But another issue that probably could also speak to the next discussion that we'll be going to in terms of austerity measures, Bwana Mwathi, is the issue of the Maisha number vis-a-vis the Huduma number. Before we get to that, Bwana Kabando is finally here. It's good to have you in studio. Karibu sana TV47.
Long time.
A long time no see.
First time, nice place, beautiful.
Oh, thank you. It is your first time at TV47.
It is also my first time on this lane.
Wow.
Very beautifully made.
Karibu sana to TV47. Former MP Mukurweini, political commentator in his own right. And we're just discussing the headline with Bwana Alex Mwathi. And we started off with what is headlining on the front page of the Daily Nation on the president reversing Uhuru's 6 billion shilling telecom buyout. We're drawing parallels and raising questions on the belief that government exists in perpetuity. One administration moves seamlessly into the next without necessarily having to reverse decisions made by the previous administration. We're questioning the risk involved in this kind of decisions, that every new administration wants to distance itself from the previous one and ends up making some knee-jerk decisions, if we may call them that. And it's not just at the national level. It's happening at the county level. It's happening even with the members of parliament, as far even as CDF is concerned. And we're asking what kind of risk the country faces. Probably we'd start with that.
Thank you very much, and a pleasure to be here at TV47. I think there are areas where government should exist in perpetuity. You know, where statehood, the statecraft is in perpetual path. But in matters impunity and corruption, there is no obligation whatsoever for the succeeding government to perpetuate their precursor or their predecessor. One of the greatest achievements of Mwai Kibaki, had you mentioned, my brother here mentioned about that, you know, standing and tolerance, was of course holding the country together. But every regime has setbacks. I think in the area of fight against corruption was not very good. And you just need to read It Is Our Time to Eat from John Githongo, one of the most celebrated civil servants of our times, where we make mistakes by not undoing what was done wrongly, and also by allowing perpetuation of practices that had stalled development. So on this particular issue, I do support Ruto's cabinet decision, because one of the clarion calls of the Kenyan people is last year, towards the elections, on both camps, was that certain matters that were done in the last regime that exemplified corruption and impunity needs to be corrected. In fact, because I was in Azimio, one of our hindrances or obstacles, challenges in campaigns, was the mistakes done by individuals in our camp. And therefore, if the deal on telecom was wrong, and individuals were paid wrongly, and there was misappropriation, which means there was corruption, and it was done because of impunity, it is important that Ruto has the courage, his cabinet. And remember, Commission on Inquiry on State Capture was well received across board, notwithstanding who voted who didn't vote for who. So this is important. Public money should be recovered.
But questions do arise because there's the issue of pending bills as well. That doing business with government, there's no longer guarantee that once you do business with government, at whatever level, that it's a deal that is sealed. Any new administration could come and reverse that. There's also a risk in that.
As a matter of fact, they hold back. Thinking about the telecom buyout, this is a public institution, so the funds that are involved are public, and the reversal is done without us, the citizens, seeing any audit done on that process. So it's a political statement just to say that there was a corruption, and I'm not saying there wasn't. But that behoves on them to do an audit that is public so that people can know, why are you reversing it?
Okay.
There's no audit whatsoever. We had a lot of political grandstanding around the time of campaign to question it and to say, why was it done? It was done on the last day. I have no idea. But I know if they say this done around the last days, it's fine. It could have been a process that ended at that time. An audit is necessary for it to be done. Because as a country, we unfortunately have been, for the longest time, been looking for opportunities to look like we are fighting corruption, while we are really not. And that's, for us as a country, is the biggest drawback.
Okay.
When you pretend you're doing something and yet you're not doing it. And which means that the results that you get out of it don't mean anything. Successful governments have come, successful governments have supported corruption, successful governments have stayed in that space. If you look at the pending bills like you mentioned right now, is billions of shillings. I think we're talking about almost 100 billion shillings for even one county like Nairobi. And each governor that comes in does what they call an audit, but they never resolve it. But immediately they come in, they start processing new contracts. And woe unto you if you're not paid by the time Sakaja leaves office in 2027. If it doesn't come in 2027, then you're not paid. You're put into that quagmire of not having money. And people are struggling. People are really, really struggling. And I think that continuity of government ought to be there, except where audited accounts so different.
Okay. Yeah. The other strand to this discussion would be the need or the perceived need for this new administration to distance itself completely from its predecessor. And case in point, some projects undertaken by the Uhuru administration, like the Huduma number, and which cost the taxpayer around 9 to 10 billion shillings. And now the new administration comes in, says, forget about that. We have our own Maisha number, which will cost us another 1 to 2 billion shillings. Definitely such decisions come at a cost, at a time when the country is struggling. Even the government itself is now moving towards austerity measures that we are going to be discussing shortly.
Well, you see, and good that my colleague here is talking about audit. Before we proceed to Maisha number, we should first of all deal with the corruption that was Huduma number. Because really, certain things don't require a 6 cents. You just use the 5 cents. Yeah? Even when EACC hasn't done any investigation, or the Auditor General hasn't completed the audit, the Auditor General, you can easily perceive. You are even allowed to imagine. Like, look at the case of Turkana. You see, Senate was convening there the last week. They went to the field. There are ghost projects. Nearly 100 billion Kenya shillings is lost. Is Senate to wait for the EACC to do investigations of or Auditor General to spend another 1 year? So this regime cannot distance itself completely from the other regime. I was there with them for the first 5 years. We saw things that happened, things that were loud enough. We saw the position of the deputy president then, who is the president now, and many of the people around him. We had many scandals, Galana Kulalu. We had the scandals, Eurobond. Some of the people in the government did, commentaries about what was happening in Eurobond. We sat with them, and now they are the advisors of the president. We were there when NYS happened. So Huduma number happened. We don't have it. They came to my house, they came to your house, they went to the villages in Kenya. Public money was used. It was 8 billion or 10 billion to do that. So immediately it is not done, and you have paid for a service and it's not delivered, and it is 1, 2, many years on. That is corruption. Before you close completely on a telecom. Don't you remember hearing in Parliament, somebody says I was paid 400 million Kenyan shillings because I'm bright. I will not want, and I've never wanted to personalize any issue because it can be very diverting. But certain statements of impunity of beneficiaries, we saw the overnight millionaires. Today, you have seen even individuals who are very supportive of this government saying that you just need to go to certain neighborhoods in this country and you see the new investments being done, the choppers being bought, the range of vehicles being bought, the transfer of children from certain schools, you know, and these are individuals from the cabinet, from Ruto's cabinet, the CSs and PSs. You have seen just the other day, we saw people pushing a lorry in Nyandarua because it was stuck in the mud. And there were not 5 people, there were tens of, and even a bus. And we saw even somebody being transported in a wheelbarrow to hospital on an emergency. Yet, at the same time, in a church, a senator was delivering money in a bag, 5 million Kenyan shillings, to a church, and even telling the congregation that hii pesa ni mzito sana, it's too heavy, don't know, and then adding that. These are stolen monies being poured around. And therefore, whether it is called Huduma number or it's called Maisha number, is another conduit to fight. Therefore, if one action is taken to recover public funds or courage is shown to investigate or spotlight, it shouldn't matter whether it was in 1970, 1980, or today.
Okay. And what would be the solution? Is it a lack of legislation to ensure that government actually does perpetuate whatever existing projects were there? Because if at all this trend continues, let's say after 5 years, just hypothetically speaking, that a new administration comes in and then they stop whatever this administration was working on and starts a new one, definitely after 5-20 years we'll be going nowhere.
When a country is established and legislates, it assumes that the people that are going to be elected to lead have what I would call common sense, to an extent that they will desire to be transformative in terms of the changes they bring. But when you have the majority of the people not being sensible, then it doesn't matter how much legislature you put in place.
That's true.
And that's our problem. And I've said this many times that for me, the best way to explain this is a Greek philosophy, because Greek are the ones who introduced us to the current form of government, of democracy, of people together, you know, with the court, the emperor's court that used to elect who becomes the next emperor. And they had their own problem. But they come to a conclusion after a few studies, and they found that there are only 3 kinds of people in the world, in any society, in any community. And I agree with them. They are, number 1, they are idiots. Number 2, they are tribesmen. And number 3, they are citizens. Idiots are people who are selfish. People who are selfish to the core. People who will kill their brothers and sisters for them to gain. The second group is the tribesmen. Tribesmen in the Greek thinking was not people who belong to one tribe and propagate their Kikuyuness or their Kalenjinness, but people who come together to against the rest, which is corporate selfishness. To an extent, the LSK in this country cannot do anything because they are extremely selfish together. And I'm not apologetic in saying that. In any action they do is about us lawyers gaining against everybody else. And you can pick up other organizations that do like that. Even religious organizations. We are the only ones who know the truth. That is tribesmen. And the citizens are people who care about a nation. It's a Lee Kuan Yew who sits back and says, as the leader of this country, I can be the richest man in the world. I'll be written in the Guinness Book of Records. Yes. Or I can make sure that this country becomes the richest country in the world, and I'll be rich in the process. So that as the country becomes rich, I also become rich, because there's no end to some of these things. So now, the Greeks said, your progression is dependent on the majority. And some used to say for me, in this country, majority of us are idiots and tribesmen.
Wow.
And that's our problem. So that when you put the law, no one respects it. I saw yesterday memes going around about the government setting up a fine for if you don't have a dustbin collection. And I'm thinking, what crap are you talking about? Majority of people live in the slums. Are you going to buy them those things? Now, you blame the government, but go to Thika Road, and Mushemia drives on that road very often, or he's driven there very often. And from Nairobi all the way to Thika, all the way to Kenol, there are signboards that says, keep left unless overtaking. Keep left unless you're overtaking.
Very few of us,
Nobody obeys that.
yes.
So we are idiots.
Wow.
We are idiots. People who don't, selfish to the core. To an extent, a police vehicle, I experienced that yesterday. A police vehicle, an old, what you call it, Land Cruiser. It doesn't have the silent that means it's going for an emergency. He's driving at 40 kilometers an hour on a 110-kilometer highway on the right. And one of the things that made me laugh is because he passed about 3, I followed him intentionally. He passed 3 those signboards saying, keep left unless overtaking. So the law keeper becomes a law
So it
breaker.
is not an issue of laws.
No, not at all.
Bwana Kabando.
It isn't, and remember the late Karaja Kabage. Even his last speech at Safari Park was about hygiene. That we are dirty, we lack hygiene. Hygiene in terms of character, and hygiene in terms of behavioral, the materials that we strew all over. We also had, we have Jiro from Kirinyaga, who talks about Ugwana initiative, being clean. And I'm happy he's mentioning my hero, or our hero, Lee Kuan Yew, about, you know, the selflessness, where you want to go. But you see, this is exactly what you're saying. You appointed a cabinet secretary, appears or you become a member of parliament, and you think your obligation first is nepotism and corruption. That you have to staff your office with your individuals, you terminate the contract of others so that you survive with the people who say yes. Or you want to be the quickest millionaire in town. I've read a lot of tweets from Grad Mullah, my friend, Haben Amnasir, former Law Society of Kenya, about how the new cabinet members or officials in this government, which I think he supports, but he is fiercely independent, are acquiring properties all over, putting up the biggest palatial homes and buying, infrastructure investments and putting a lot of money in other channels. So it is important as a country to accept that we get the leaders we deserve. That's why some of us, even we are opposed to our opponents, or we don't support or we do not vote for the government that is in power, should accept that by the Constitution, by the rule of law, by the systems and institutions so set, this individual and that other officer was elected validly and therefore legitimately. Then we deal with the problem from there. Okay. That we need to have a political hygiene. My mother, the late Wangari Maathai, her of your neighbor, Kalula Forest and Uhuru Park, once quipped that people get the leaders they deserve. So simple things, like when he's talking about people on the road, the impunity should not just by government officers, even by private people. Just because of a big vehicle, you push everybody off the lane.
It's quite a lot, especially
it happens. No, it is a national. and then if you are driving on the road, you allow even yourself and even your passengers to throw peels of bananas and mangoes on the road, and it's on a highway, and you think that's okay, and yet you cannot allow that peel to even be put inside your car. And the the unreasonable demands that are being made. I think this case of overtaxation, when you are telling people to have 3 dustbins, true, many people are struggling to afford even that polythene paper.
Some don't even
or even sack to put there. So it's a question of governance.
Okay.
We need to streamline, and I don't think it is the law that doesn't exist. That's why even when you're looking at these talks in a bombers,
we cannot legislate bad manners.
You can't. Even if we implemented what is in the Constitution of Kenya 2010, and we just demanded that be done. Is it the Constitution or the law that is preventing?
Hold that thought. We're about to take a break. And this discussion now leads us to the next discussion we're going to have, where we ask, do you think the government is genuine in its latest efforts to cut spending? With all this conversations that we're having and grandiose behavior, do you think the government is genuine in its latest efforts to cut spending? You can continue interacting with us on our social media pages, TV47 News on X and TV47 Kenya on Facebook. You're watching Morning Cafe. Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Indimuli. I'm in studio with Alex Mwathi, political analyst, and Kabando Kabando, former MP Mukurweini. And gentlemen, I want us now to talk about the government's move towards what we could call austerity. I don't know if we are there yet, or it's just an attempt. And I'm making reference to that yesterday's cabinet dispatch that directed all government departments to cut down on their spending by 10% in this financial year. And this comes only about a month or two after the budget has been passed. Then, 24 hours earlier, that memo by the head of public service, Felix Koskei, suspending all non-essential travel for senior government officials, and interestingly, directing that the entourages for foreign travel for the president, the first lady, the deputy president, and the prime cabinet secretary should be reduced by 50%. Today we're asking, is the government genuine in its latest efforts to cut spending? Because on one hand, we've seen how this government behaves. The president has been to 35 countries in 1 year alone. We've seen the kind of entourage that accompanies him on all this foreign travel. And to come now and tell us that we're going to cut that down by half what scale are we using to measure what half is? Hence the question, is the government genuine? Let's start with you, Bwana Mwadhi.
My opinion is that that's a knee-jerk reaction to the complaints that we as Kenyans have been complaining about the expenditure of the government. To an extent, I do not think there's any sincerity in that. Number one, if you visited 35 countries in 12 months, it means that you visited 3 countries every month. That's a hefty number of countries. And you do have a foreign affairs minister to be able to do that. And what comes to mind is Magufuli. When Magufuli wanted to do austerity measure, especially on foreign travel, he said nobody needs to go anywhere. Mm-hmm. You have your virtual meetings. You have the people coming in that want to talk to us. And we're starting with me. I'm going nowhere. Mm-hmm. And in the years that God gave him to rule that country, I think the only countries he visited were Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda. Because he's a member of the East African community, he had an obligation to be able to meet his counterpart in the region. Mm-hmm. He cut off, don't go anywhere. If you wanted to go anywhere, come and ask me for permission. And be sure you know what you're going to do. Because 99% of the visits that we do are really a waste of money. Mm-hmm. The benchmarking, I don't know what, all these kind of things. And they're good if the country has the money. We are broke, so we can't afford. Mm-hmm. You remember recently, this gentleman, Moses Kuria, was said to have gone to Dubai, of all places, with an entourage of 30 people. In my opinion, cost cutting by the government should be a requirement. Okay. Because when a country is struggling even to pay its debts, you see in one of the dailies they're talking about us falling behind in terms of the payments that we are doing for our loans. You've got to cut down. A 10% reduction is a joke, complete joke. Mm-hmm. It means that nobody is going to do it. And the reason I'm saying this is that because this has been said before by successful governments. You remember even Kibaki time, there was a time that we were going through this situation, and at that time we decided that all vehicles that would be bought by the mm-hmm. government would be Volkswagen Passat. No one followed it.
Yes. You are an assistant minister in that government.
No one followed it.
Is it that easy for any government like the one in our situation to actually carry out austerity measures? We saw an attempt by President Mwai Kibaki to do so. How successful that was vis-a-vis the kind of attempts we are seeing now? What's your assessment on that?
I think to give credit where due, Kibaki was on a different level. Mm-hmm. As an individual, as a leader, as a president. His character was very mature and he had vision. That's why immediately he came to office, he did not fear bringing people even from outside, from Singapore, from Japan, from even Britain. Leader Choka came here, and then corporate chiefs, the captains of industry and the intellectuals, to form the National Economic and Social Council. Remember, he was also not hesitant to leave vice chancellorship of all the public universities. Before, the president was the chancellor of all the public universities. Kibaki was a pioneer chancellor of only Masida Morillo University. Mm-hmm. And he allowed the people, including Ali Mazurui, who was living in the US, very celebrated Kenyan, to come and steward these institutions. So when you look at now the current arrangement, why one would not trust even the initiatives that are being done is by actions themselves. Look at all the things that have been said. We are now talking about importing yellow maize. Mm-hmm. Just recently, the president invited the head of the Anglican Church, offering him hundreds of acres in Galana Kulalu to plant feed for animals. Now we are saying we are bringing yellow maize. I don't know whether it's for animals or for us as human beings. Look at the money that is wasted every week is so-called prayer rallies. We want to misappropriate. Kenya is not a theocracy. In the constitution and even in practice of government, we are a secular state where we don't have prejudices, or we shouldn't have prejudices on the basis of religion or theology. Now, it is not easy to implement austerity measures. I was assistant minister when that PASAT initiative was done with Uhuru Kenyatta then as finance minister. And the intention was to reduce pilferage, wastage in fuel guzzlers, and to ensure that we had cost-effective running of government. But even when he had PASAT, a number of the newly acquired vehicles, the high-range vehicles, were actually purchased quietly by people inside government. So mistakes can happen, but not on a grand scale. I was saying yesterday a comment from a journalist about the Judicial Service Commission. They went to Siaya to meet the governor. A whole Judicial Commission went there. Yet, in the court today, cases are heard mostly virtually. Yes. Universities, the colleges, a lot of learnings are happening in the evenings virtually. Court hearings, many of them, you don't have to travel to Malindi if you are domiciled in Nairobi, or to Nyeri if you are domiciled, you are resident in Kisumu. The courts are being ran virtually. Of course, this is courtesy of the disaster we had of COVID, but we perfected that challenge to serve us. So the wastage that is in government is preventable, is not easy. A lot of people who have gone, I tell you, before they now implement this new directive, and I think it's a good one. We have to support what is good. This directive on cost cutting, on foreign travel is very, very good. Even on domestic travel, they should do the same. Even on government advertising, I know we need the revenues as media and all that. We also need to look at what we need to spend. On these meetings, parties, hosting people at the State House, in the President's palace, in the Deputy President's palace, and all these people are being paid for these days. People are given money to attend even meetings. Can I tell you this? The President is heading to Kisumu. What cost-cutting measures are there? When the leaders, including senators of those respective areas, and the governors where they are quietly supporting,
are being paid to attend the president's.
No, they are giving residents in Kisumu 3 days ago. Somebody was caught, a politician from Kisumu, giving 200 shillings for people to receive the president. Recently, the president was in Nyeri for a few days in Sagana. The first thing they did is to give people rice and meat in my home county. A little embarrassing. Food is good, but that was bribery. And then, including in my home sub-county of Mukurweini, for people to attend the president's roadside meetings. Okay. They were being given lunch and the transport of 200 shillings. Okay. So we are doing a very good thing, lofty thing. This one I can support. But you know why they are doing this? They are not doing it because they want to. They are doing it to satisfy the conditionalities of IMF. Because Kenya has been captured. Like in the Moi time, Kenya is back to IMF. Structural adjustment programs. What cost cutting when you're saying you have allocated so much money to Higher Education Loans Board, and today, the suicide cases, the depressions, the dropouts, the changing of courses in the universities. It's because people don't have money.
It's misappropriation. And the kind of system put in place by any government that says it wants to undertake some austerity measures. The approach is surely a bit more serious than a cabinet memo or a memo from the head of public service to all government ministries. Given the extent and the severity of this issue, the way government operates, a simple memo or a circular to state departments may not necessarily suffice. The structure for proper austerity measures would be different, probably better structured, don't you think?
Those of us run business know that when your business is struggling One of the ways is not to write memos to heads of departments or divisional heads to tell them to cut costs. Is to put your heads together and agree where are you cutting cost. To an extent, and you know, one of the most famous things is that in business, unfortunately, one of the areas that get hit fast is the staff. Then you decide what else are we not going to do as a company, and we agree we are going to cut it off. Because when you tell people reduce 10%, what are you communicating? What are you saying? As a matter of fact, it's a political statement and it means nothing. For a businessman like me, it means zero. If I went to the business and I told people now, I want you to cut 10%, I want you to cut 20%, what am I telling them?
What exactly are they cutting?
We need to sit around a table and agree that you're going to cut this. And I want to say this, that where it becomes a joke is because as you send out memos saying that people must cut costs 10%, reduction of travel, 2 or 3 or 1 or 2, whatever numbers that you're giving, meaning that the per diems or whatever cost comes down, which is a very good thing, like Kabado says. At the same time, you're pronouncing some statements that makes some people wonder whether there is any thought in government. When you say that I'm going to build houses in Kibera, and in 5 years, there will be no slums in Kibera, it means that you have not allowed people to think.
True.
Because the existence of the slums in Kibera is not because there are no houses.
It's because of poverty.
It's because those people are poor. So what you need to do is not to build them houses. If you build skyscrapers in Kibera, where will those people get food to eat so that they can make in that skyscrapers? Do you know what will happen? As soon as those skyscrapers are up, and you know the demand of housing in this country outstrips the supply by large margins. We do about 50,000 units. Our demand is 250,000 units a year. Those people will sell them immediately, the same one, and then go and start another slum elsewhere. Maybe they'll go to Mukuru kwa Jenga or wherever. Then you go to Mukuru kwa Jenga, they'll shift to the next one. Meaning that there is not good thought into the solution to the issues that are there. Because when you go to a doctor and you have headache, doctors always have a choice to either give you Panadol or take you through the MRI, CT scan, and all that to determine, because you could be having a headache because of migraine. You could be having a headache because of malaria. And the treatment for those is different. So the government needs to sit back and think, what are the issues? What are the real issues in this? Why are people traveling all over the place? It's because they want to make money. What will happen if they don't travel? They'll find ways of making money. I know a governor who have told his people that within my county, you have hotels. Because you remember in the previous regime, every county would have their strategic meeting in Mombasa. The purpose was to make money. You're coming all the way from Turkana to Mombasa to do a meeting. There are no hotels in Nairobi, there are no hotels in Kisumu, there are no hotels in Turkana. And one governor has told them no. And I don't think that guy will survive for long. He'll be kicked out by the members because it's preventing them from meeting. So what will happen?
Parliamentary committees holding their meetings in high-end city hotels.
Exactly.
Then it beats, because what are these measures you're talking about just by directing people to cut down by 50%? Yet the real moves, the real suggestions of what exactly to cut down are not being discussed.
You know, there are two issues. One is on policy statement. A policy pronounced, if it is good, deserves commendation. And therefore, that policy statement that was pronounced recently on cost cutting, in its statement context alone, is positive. Now, on the practice. That's why Alex is saying, very aptly so, that practice and theory are different. That you can do memos, they can be countless. But exactly what are you doing? Now, you have stopped the big delegations. Maybe you'll target a few of people who are not even culpable, people who are in service innocently and they are ready to do, except that the culture may capture them and they perpetrate what is dominant in government. But if by deed, look at the delegation that went to Italy last week to negotiate for hundreds of billions of dollars projects on dams. It was clearly a delegation meant to go and negotiate for deals, in my view. I looked at it, I interrogated. The wars in the water sector. We will not defend anyone because we don't know whether they're innocent or they are guilty. But we know also what is happening on the sidelines is battle to control the billions in that sector. Look at all the other launches that are happening, even in the housing. From the taxation itself, to the arrangement on who is going to benefit from these houses, to who is being given the contracts. Where is the bidding? Where is the transparency? Government is about accountability and transparency. That's what you call good governance. By all means and purposes, the Ruto administration hasn't shown any clear intention to crush corruption or impunity. If you are looking for the best, and that's why I mentioned Kibaki's, or even the founding cabinet of Jomo Kenyatta at 1963, before bad politics came, where you had the Boyers and the Jaramogis, people around there. You could say quality, there was intention to get quality, even though they were already elected as members of parliament then. The cabinet was qualitative. If you look at the Kibaki's National Economic Council, you could see the people he drew. But look at the people Ruto has put in cabinet. Look at the revocations that are happening. Recently I commented about the Kenya Institute of Mass Communication revoking a gracious lady whose credentials, in my view, has gone to Cardiff, is a Chevening scholar, also a scholar, and there's a veteran media practitioner. And I'm not saying the police spokesman, former police spokesman, did not deserve the appointment. But these revocations is about cronyism. As a president, you cannot be so vindictive, so malicious, that you want to punish everyone who was associated or appointed by your predecessor. Yet, Ruto, for 5 years, was running this government, and I was in the parliament then, I know. Yet, even in the second term, where he says he was put aside, he was still enjoying state legacy, launching all these projects everywhere. Look at what he did over the weekend. Relaunching for the third time a road project here in Gatundu, and then mobilizing everyone and giving handouts, and even residents being mobilized in the villages to come and attend the meeting. That practice of wastage, no matter how many memos Ruto write, no matter how many high-sounding so-called Pan-Africanism speeches that he's going to give on global stage, the buck stops at him, and he can go impress the IMF, and he can talk with Biden because of Haiti. But the point is, students are not accessing. Today, if you go to villages across Kenya, a lot of day scholars are being sent home because there's no fees. Day scholars in a secondary school. Many students in boarding schools are changing schools to go to day school or dropping from school because of lack of fees. Look, go to the universities. Yesterday, Multimedia University, that trains in the communication and journalism. Why? In the streets, because Higher Education Laws Board has not dispersed the money. Everywhere you go, depression, suicide, murders. The point is, the epitome of the Ruto administration is escalation of suffering and poverty. But when he makes a good statement, like that of cost cutting, as a commentator I would say, is a good statement. But the practice is contrary.
It's just a statement. But then, because I sense a sense of hopelessness, that if we look up to this administration, this executive, then we have no way out. But do austerity measures necessarily have to come from the executive only, or are there other entities? And in this instance, I'm talking about Parliament, for example. Is there any way that Parliament could ensure that austerity measures are put in place, or we are in a hopeless state?
We are not in a hopeless state, and that's why you call some of us to be able to interrogate some of these issues without being critical, just for the sake of being critical, because there's a level in which you make everything political. So when you oppose it from political position. But there's a place where you say, well, we've had a change in government. The previous government was not better. As a matter of fact, I believe it was worse, 10 times worse, because even the conversations were not taking place like they are doing today in terms of a conversation happening and you see something happening. Like I told you about this whole issue of austerity, is because of the amount of noise people have made, both in Twitter, in Facebook, and wherever, that the government has sat back and say, oops. So there's, in a sense, it is not a hopeless situation. If only we could find enough people who can keep telling them that you are wrong here, that you can move in this direction. True. So it's not a case of hopelessness whatsoever. And I believe that they are listening. And what I keep hoping is that irrespective of the judgment that my colleague have made of them being mediocre, that they will be able to sit around a table and be able to start.
When you talk about people, because we want to get it clear, because
the government.
You said people talking to government, because for example in Ghana there are street protests because people are discontented about government behavior in the current financial environment, that government appears not really keen on cutting down on spending. They want to refurbish the central bank at a cost of about 250 million. I forget the currency, but simply because of government taking too long to adjust and change. Those are the Mwananchi in Ghana. Are you saying that probably it is up to the Mwananchi in Kenya to push government towards austerity?
No, what I meant is that in this country we had those mandamanos, but mandamanos became extremely political. Is one man's agenda being pushed by that, and a lot of people stepped back and said, "Oops, this is not about us. This is about an individual and the power." So at the end of every speech, you mention the cost of living, but the rest of the talk is about an election that is stolen, about all that shenanigans that were happening at that time. But in this country, people are quick on the keyboard, so that when issues come up, Twitter, Facebook always have a lot of activity. And there have been a lot of activity in terms of people that are an extreme in terms of what they are doing, and the government is thinking. So I think the question you had asked is there any other way? First question is, are we hopeless? No, we are not, because we are talking. And we'll continue talking to the government until somebody listens to us and start acting. And number two, are there other bodies that can assist in this? Of course, yes. Remember, the Constitution lays three arms of government that are meant to be independent: the judiciary, the legislature, and of course the executive, the president, the one that is issuing these memos. The legislature is an unfortunate thing for me. Because we for some reason thought that higher numbers means more representation, higher numbers meant more thinking, higher numbers meant more control, higher numbers meant more of what the register is supposed to do. Unfortunately, it hasn't done. And it's very unfortunate. A country of 57 million people has 349 members of parliament, 67 senators. You're talking about 400 representatives at the national level. Sorry?
14 fifth MCS.
Forget about the lower one, Kwanzaa. So you're talking about 400 people. India, with a population of 1.4 billion people, has only 550 members of parliament. How many? 1.4 billion people. Meaning that, and that's why you find in this country, we have 400 members of parliament, but how many can you meet on the road, remember? This man was there for, I think, one term. You remember him. He talked. There's some who've been there for even 15 years. They have never contributed at all. No. So they are able to help in terms of questioning. And you see they keep calling people in to question them in terms of why are you doing this, why are you doing that. The Senate is there. And also, of course, the judiciary. And unfortunately, you had the comment that if it's a governor's issue, you have to all go to Migori instead of using Mbachu or ask him to come to Nairobi.
Back to the question of hopelessness. You mentioned all three, and you talked about how unfortunate it is, the situation in all, in the executive, in the legislature, and in the judiciary.
Three things. Hope. In 2002, a global survey rated Kenya the most optimistic community, a very hopeful community, because people are very hopeful that the sun of victory and the prosperity was emerging from the eastern horizon, and the sun of corruption and impunity and bad governance and dictatorship was setting on the western horizon. So it is very easy to convert a people from hopelessness to being optimistic, to have a lot of hope. Let me cite 3 Bible verses here. In the book of Romans, chapter 5, verse 5, talks about hope, that hope does not disappoint. Anything else will disappoint, hope doesn't disappoint. If you go to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 8 to 10, says, even if I'm pushed, I'm not down. Even if I'm crushed, I'm not dead. No matter what happens, because there is a supreme being. And in Psalms 121, verse 1, there is that cry of a person asking, where is my hope going to come from? I'm looking into the mountain. And then God says, your rescue, your salvation will come from me, your God. If we do the right thing, from the top, the Chinese say, the fish rots from the hand. If we do the right thing from the presidency, everything will calm down. But now about parliament. As a former parliamentarian, Joe Hamisi has written quite comprehensively, former journalist. He's a journalist even now, and he's an author and a former member of parliament, and was very outspoken, Joe Hamisi from Coast. And he has given a lot of stories, real citations about what happens in that house. I've also written a number of articles, and other people have spoken. You remember even a cabinet secretary saying when he was in the parliament, admitted that he was given 100,000 shillings, and no action was taken by either the speaker nor by the body, EACC, or those mandated to do that. I don't see the current arrangement happening without the pressure that Alex is talking about. The Speaker of the National Assembly today, no grudge, is actually my friend. I call him Moses the poet. He is spending more of his time moving across the country to sing around Ruto and Kenya Kwanza. Yet the Speaker of the National Assembly is the third in command after the President and the Deputy President. In case of absence of the two, he's one in charge of the country, constitutionally. But he's spending so much time on Saturdays and Sundays, on Fridays, moving across the country with all these bags of money, talking about how Ruto is going to win, how Ruto is going to retain in 2027. Yet that is in the Constitution, an institution that is supposed to check, to legislate, where representation of the people happen, where oversight of government does happen. So in that regard, one may be forgiven for saying not a lot of hope in this parliament.
Yes, because even back in 2002, yes, when you mentioned the fact that there was a lot of hope, yes, and we were the most optimistic in the globe, probably some of that optimism came from the fact that we had some sense of assurance that the parliament back then, it was a different constitutional dispensation, but the parliament back then was not under the capture of the executive. Yes,
it wasn't, because there was a very strong opposition.
Exactly.
And actually the leader of opposition was now headed for victory. And then there was a split in the ruling party KANU when the Rainbow Group came out from Kasarani. Wakati Kasarani ilikuwa Kisarani, and they moved on. That brought a rainbow of hope. But I wanted to comment on this other point of the civilian power. Kenyans must not underestimate the power they have on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. Today, I can tell you from my village on the foot of Mount Kenya, the greatest power is on radio. These discussions we have on radio. These discussions we have on TV. Like now I know after this program is over, a few people will be on the social platform to see what was said. And, you know, the YouTubers, people who have no big names, we don't even know their CVs or their backgrounds. But we know there are YouTubers who are every week giving very strong messages that are inspiring. In fact, social media and the independent media are more powerful in bringing change in the world today than those administrators in government and the high-powered politicians. And let me tell you, look at what has happened in Sudan. Look what happened in Tunisia. All those earlier days in the Philippines and Indonesia. Small boys or young youthful women on the road. But today, that is complemented even better by the media platforms. Okay. So we are not hopeless.
Back to the people.
But the situation is very bad.
Back to the people.
It starts with the people and ends with the people because we are the ones who select. But you must not forget, Fred, and this is what I would like us as Kenyans to think about, that while people say we get leaders we deserve, I have my contrary opinion, and I don't agree with that statement. But we get the leaders who represent who we are. To an extent, if you find that most of our leaders are corrupt, then it means that majority of us are corrupt. It's not, they don't come from heaven, they come from among us. So it behoves on us to be able to question ourselves as to what do we do on a daily basis to propagate that which we are criticizing ourselves. Because there is something we are doing that reflects that which we are criticizing on a daily basis. And there's nothing bigger as people's power, because people's power is the one that changes everything anywhere in the world. Of course, you have benevolent leaders who come, Lee Kuan Yew of this world, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, though he made his mistakes, but he actually changed that country completely. But at the end of the day, it's you and I. And we cannot afford to lose hope, even in the midst of any situation.
Okay.
And going back to the government, it's just because they listen, to just put a little bit of thinking in the things. First, they say, two, they do, three, they portray. Because sometimes they portray things as if they are not serious. When you have the chief of staff writing a memo dismissing a CEO of parastatal, while we know that the CEO is really answerable to the CES, who is the appointing authority, what message are you communicating to this country? What are you communicating to the country? That the state capture that you kept talking about in the past, that you've gone back on your words in terms of allowing people? And number three, just to remind ourselves that while we were very hopeful in 2003, I wrote an article, I don't know whether Kabado saw it, shortly after Kibaki took over. And I was very unhappy with the fact that we were celebrating Kibaki becoming president, that Kibaki represented change. And in that article, which I paid for, the advertiser payment at that time, was saying that, look, Kibaki was part of the old. He had his own positives, but there's nothing new about him. And he aptly said that the corruption train did not even stall. It moved even faster because it was part of that which we were trying to change. But our positivity was due to the fact that the pain we felt under Moi, we had a relief that these other pain would be less. Because unfortunately, when you get a lot of pain, it becomes normal. And under Moi, we had reached a point where the pain had become almost normal. So when you had a change, you thought, oops, This pain is better than the pain that we had at the poor. So to remind ourselves that, look, if we want change, we'll have to change.
Okay. But historically, other entities and organizations, including the civil society, workers' unions, alternative governments in the opposition, really played a key role in channeling this kind of energy from the populace towards whatever they felt against the government or against any push by government. This time around, we're looking at a situation where the opposition is preoccupied with the previous election. The trade or workers' unions spend more time at State House. Civil society has been muted for some reason, interestingly. There appears to be a disconnect, that the situation and the ability of the Mwananchi to actually get their voices heard has really been dumbed down this time round due to lack of those entities I've mentioned. What happened to the civil society, for example?
Let me start with the trade union, because the trade union movement, from the solidarity movement of Pollard, Lechuelesa, to Kenya's own Tomboya, the Confederation of Workers in Africa, trade union movement has been a good platform to represent people, to defend people's rights, and even to groom leadership nationally that will represent the interest of the public, issues of equality, equity, and justice. Someone will be dishonest to say that we really have a national trade union movement in Kenya. KOTU at one time was affiliated to the ruling party KANU, just like Maendeleo Wanawake was affiliated to KANU during Moi's era. But KOTU of latter day is about survival. Truly. Last year, up to the ruling of the Supreme Court to confirm the current president, the leadership of KOTU was with the president that time. Immediately the leaf turned, they shifted allegiance to the current one, and they started even criticizing the former and even saying this is why we failed and so on and so forth. And the leader of KOTU spending more time towing the president wherever he goes, particularly, see, it's very unfortunate in one region. You are the national leader of the KOTU, but you are not ever seen somewhere in Nyeri or Moyale. You are never seen somewhere in Taveta. You always talk about Vihiga or Kakamega, you are dominant, the ethnic enclave. So when it is challenged or dented at the top, the trickle down is not easy to the other trade unions affiliated to you. To give credit, Kenya National Union of Teachers has really been lobbying for teachers' interests and has been strong. It has withstood the test of our time, I think. That's a challenge. On civil society, I will not blame them. I can still see a lot of actions happening. I can see a lot of cases. I can see even professional bodies like Law Society of Kenya. Even with its challenges, they have been very outspoken. Eric Deuri and his team have been very outspoken on current issues, including the controversial finance bill 2023. He is there. The team is there. I've also seen Katiba Institute that was very active in the BBI cases and others. I have seen the Kenya Human Rights Commission coming up again. I have seen civil society activists trying to regroup. After 2002 elections, a lot of civil society gurus were assimilated by the new administration. And they did a very good job. Some became members of parliament, others became governors, other CSs, then cabinets and commissioners. But where we may have the big challenge is the area of constitutionalism and rule of law. The Constitution of Kenya has created institutions that really anchor the spirit of civil society that we had. We have the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Is it speaking where there are human rights violations or police killings? Is ma'am, because it completely state captured. We have the Independent Police Oversight Authority, IPOA, is now telling us 52 people are killed by police. There's giving a report. And they are giving a report to a body that is actually dubious, the so-called bombers dialogue. You know, is an arrangement between Ruto and Raila. And they are delegates. Ruto has given 50%, Raila has given 50%. It's not a national dialogue. IPOA is going there to spew their frustrations, to tell us 52 people are killed by police, but they have not cited any single policeman to be charged in a court of law, to be punished for killing innocent people. Okay? Then we have another one called Ombudsman, okay? Which is supposed to audit governance in public institutions and fora. We have these institutions created at UNCAD. We have the Gender and Equality Commission, okay, that is supposed to do this work. We have the Salary and the Remuneration Commission that is supposed to do all the things to do with the public payroll, the allowances and all that. So our constitution is good. It is a failure by the office holders of respective offices created in this progressive constitution to practice good governance hygiene.
Okay. What is your assessment of those entities, political parties, which should ideally be alternative governments, civil society and the workers' unions? Because interestingly, Kabando has dismissed what is going on at Bomas of Kenya. And I was to come to that because there are very ambitious discussions happening there as well, even as we discussed austerity measures.
I think we sat with you here and we talked about that Bomas, and when you bring it up, we will take it up. But I told you the decisions were made during the meeting between Ruto and Raila in Mombasa. This is just window dressing. I call it in Kikuyu is a very nice word, menyonyo. You know, you just yeah. At the end of the day, you come with a proposal to change the constitution, and then we'll do a referendum that will be rejected by the court, and the 2027 election will take place because people have been paid and they are happy. Civil societies became very strong in the United States of America, especially due to the racial segregations that were there. You have Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and those kind of characters. And these are organizations that are meant to be able to speak irrespective, to an extent, speak on issues that affect the society and help them. And we've come very well, and they had become very strong during Moi's time, because there are real issues we're talking about. But in the process, because we know how to deal with people who speak against us, in the preceding governments, rightly said, some of them won parliament, some of them were appointed by government, meaning that they were sucked in into a situation. To an extent today, if a civil society person speaks, you know which side is supporting. Unfortunately, people are not able to see them as they used to see them then. Wangari Maathai stands against the building of skyscrapers at Uhuru Park. Everybody sees the sense in that and listens to her. Today, you're speaking and you are more aligned to Azimio than the Kenya Kwanza government. So people are knowing that we're just looking for an opportunity to be able to be part of that government if it comes place. And that's a very unfortunate situation for us as a country, that the people that speak on behalf of the society are not civil. I think I would not like to use the word that people use, that they become evil society. Because once you take sides, you become evil, because you're no longer about what is right. Because politicians, and Kamara will tell you, will speak on what benefits them.
True, largely.
To an extent, he would say something today because it benefits them, and tomorrow say the exact opposite because it benefits them at that point. And that's why you see people who agreeing with Ruto, and Ruto doing 122 campaign meetings for him while he's done 5. And immediately, 2-3 months down the line, they become enemies. And you wonder, hey, what happened to this? That's the civil society, that they have lost that touch with reality to an extent now. They are more of sounding boards for the opposition. They themselves have become opposition party. Number 2, from the time of Moi, good analogy that time Kotu was part of KANU. KOTU has remained almost supportive of the government. And that's a very sad.
Successive government.
Successive government. And that's very sad. Because KOTU is supposed to speak on behalf of workers. Remember, it's the umbrella body for the Planters Association, Textile and Workers Association, Engineering and Metal Workers Association. It's actually the umbrella body for these organizations. And this organization, their main purpose is not politics. Their main purpose is to work for the benefit of the workers. Mm-hmm. To an extent like today, KOTU should actually be the one fighting a lot that you are taxing people to their death. Mm-hmm. You have 3 million Kenyans working formally. When you keep increasing the taxes, you are saying that 3 million people will run this country for a country of 57 million people. It's KOTU that is supposed to be coming up and say, hey, hold on. There is an issue here. Why don't we rethink this? Are they doing that? No, because they're in bed with the government. And it's in a very unfortunate situation. Then they're supposed to even talk about, if you are to talk about government, they'll talk about democracy. But if the KOTU Secretary General has been KOTU Secretary General for the last 40 years, what democracy does he use? And he's elected every year.
Wow.
It means that he's worse than the government that he's going to criticize.
Okay.
And we're talking about reality, and very unfortunate realities. Political parties, which political parties? We don't have a single political party in this country. Mm-hmm. Because political parties will be determined by, one, the constitution they hold, two, their registration at the political parties. If they don't honor, if an organization doesn't honor the constitution that it has, it ceases to exist as a legal entity. Which party in this country has held elections in the last 10 years? Mm-hmm. Which political party? Is it Kenya Kwanza? Is it UDA? Is Kenya Kwanza a political party? No. Is it UDA? Is it ODM? None of them have held any elections whatsoever in this country.
Gentlemen, because of time, I want us now to go to that issue of political parties and what is happening at the Bomas of Kenya. As you make your last remarks, we have about 5 minutes or so we'll split it equally. You say from what I hear, you dismiss the whole process that's happening there. And they're quite ambitious proposals there, and whether or not it will materialize to anything, we have to wait and see. But there has to be some necessity to these discussions, especially on the issue of reconstitution of the IEBC. We're looking at some very risky deadlines, especially with the boundaries review coming up, the deadline coming up in March. It is prescribed in the Constitution. It would be the very first time we're defying it. We still do not know the consequences of that. Definitely, there needs to be some consequence to these talks as you make your final
Yes, let me first say that it is important to criticize and critique, to own it. A lot of people ask, you are criticizing the government, what solution are you giving? Mm-hmm. It is for government to offer those solutions. Government has a manifesto, it has the budget, it has the strategic plans of every department. So those of us who are able to voice concerns, even if we're 24/7, 365 days in a year, just to spotlight mistakes by government, that is opposition. That is objective criticism, and you criticize on issues, not on personalities. But if you have been given high responsibility, then much is expected on you, and your name will not escape the criticism, because you are holder of that office for the time being. Mm-hmm. That should be understood. Bombers is a trickery. I call it political chicanery, a deception full of lies, up in issue, for the following reasons. One, what took to bombers? It was the maandamano. And what was the loudest and almost united voice of Kenyans? Cost of living. Mm-hmm. People did not say they want an office for an opposition leader when you have a system of a majority and minority all the way to the counties, therefore meaning 48 parliament. People never say they want to extend the term of the president or to create other offices. So if people are sincere and genuine, from the beginning, then there's a legitimacy and there's goodwill. Okay. Two, Raila and Ruto met. This town is very small. And they met at night. Mm-hmm. And they talked. Neither Raila nor Ruto has found it necessary to tell Kenyans honestly that we met, we discussed, and we agreed what to do. Whatever they discussed is about appeasement. And unfortunately, in our politics of chicanery, of lies and deception, of greed, of selfishness and corruption, is about the individuals, a settlement of a contract that was accorded to you by the previous regime through your proxy, an appointment of an officer here, and a benefit there. So when the principals don't meet like Mandela met with the clerk and decided what to do and announcements were made, and therefore a Truth and Justice Reconciliation Commission and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, then it means from the beginning you are lying to the people.
Okay.
So I challenge Raila Odinga and I challenge President Ruto to tell Kenyans what they discussed when they met, because they did not meet to talk about Opondo Farm and the Sugoi Farm.
Okay.
Now, number two, if the Bombers caucus is genuine, why are they fearful or reluctant to tell Kenyans that they have misappropriated public money through Parliament, where they went to see the Speaker Moses Wetangula, and somebody who is being paid allowances in the Parliament, somebody who is being paid salary as a governor, somebody who is being paid allowances as a leader in Parliament, and somebody on Presidential Retirement Act receiving emolument, even at home, domestic workers and drivers and cars, is being paid allowances there. The fact that they have misappropriated public money, and I challenge Kimani Ichung'wah and Kalonzo Musyoka, and incidentally, both of them are my personal friends. I like that disclaimer. They are my personal friends. We talk with Kalonzo and Kimani, we have very good standing. But I challenge both of them in the interest of public to tell Kenyans who is funding them.
Okay.
They should not tell us it's a non-government organization. If they are being funded by IMF or by America, they tell us. Okay. If they have conducted money meant for public, which taxpayers are overstressed, overburdened by taxation of this Ruto administration, let them say so.
Okay. Because of time.
Bombers is a waste of time, and Bombers is a disaster, is a cacophony of individuals who are misappropriating the public goodwill, and they must fall.
Okay. Finally, Bwana Mwathi, you have about 2 minutes.
Two men met in Mombasa, the President of the Republic of Kenya and the de facto opposition leader. Raila, they met in a closed-door meeting because nothing came out, and they agreed on way forward. One man picks 5, the other one man picks 5, and they come together, and that becomes a national dialogue. That's where the lie starts.
Okay.
So the agreement is done, well done, and we're just waiting for them to come up with a 30-40 page report that will be taken around the country to show that we need a referendum to do 1, 2, 3 things. We'll go to court, we'll cancel it. So really what we are doing is to waste another 20-30 billion shillings that is required to develop this country. Unfortunately for you and I, my fellow Kenyan, is that this burden is on you. We've continued to support one side or the other side in a sycophantic way, to an extent forgetting that Ruto was deputy president during Kenyatta's time, forgetting that Raila was a de facto deputy president during Kenyatta's time. So basically they were eating from our plate at that time, and they're still eating from our plate today, and they will continue eating from our plate as long as we don't use our common sense. As long as we allow them to continue considering us as fools, we remain fools in this country. Okay. May God help us that one day we will wake up and rethink, so that by the time we come to 2027, we will be awake to be able to create a leadership that reflects us. We must stop, first of all, being corrupt ourselves. We must stop breaking the law and pretending that we are holier than thou, and do what is right.
Thank you so much, Alex Mwathi, political analyst, and Kabando, former MP Mukurweini, for your very well-considered opinions on this matter of austerity and other issues that affect the country. Gentlemen, Allow me to read this editorial comment as we come to the end of our session. Asanteni sana for agreeing to come to this panel. Now, the role of the church in public political discourse is a complex and often contentious issue in many countries, and Kenya is no exception. The past year has witnessed a diverse range of engagements between the church and the state, raising questions about the responsibilities and impact of religious institutions in the realm of politics. One notable aspect of this relationship is the involvement of some church leaders who appear to be closely aligned with political power. Their frequent visits to State House and perceived reluctance to criticize government actions have raised concerns about the potential co-optation of the church by those in authority. This close proximity to power can lead to questions about the church's independence and its ability to serve as a moral compass for society. Mainstream churches that have traditionally played a significant role in advocating for the protection of citizens' rights and social justice issues have seemingly also become less vocal in recent times. It is good to note, however, that some sections of the church leadership have started to awaken to the pressing issues affecting Kenyans, like the rising cost of living. Their willingness to speak out against social and political challenges is a welcome development. In a context where civil society organizations, workers' unions, and even opposition legislators appear more aligned with the government and the people they represent, the voice of the church can serve as a crucial check and balance on power. The NCCK, IRC, as well as bishops from the Anglican and Catholic churches and others can indeed provide an alternative platform for